It is January 2024 now, and it's been a while since I've done a video. I know. I say that every single time I post a video, but it's been a while. I've been enjoying my Christmas holidays and New Year's holidays and school holidays, because we're in school holidays here in Melbourne, Australia. Welcome to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Claire. I am a full-time professional artist based in Melbourne, Australia. I'm just doing a quick video today just to sort of fill you in on some things that I've been doing. I haven't really been in the studio much working per se, but I have been playing around at home in my sketchbook, and there's a few new ideas brewing, and I can even feel like maybe a slight shift in style or direction, or even just inspiration maybe. So I thought I would show you my sketchbook that I've been working on at home, talk a little bit about what's been influencing me, some artists that I've been looking at recently that have impacted and slightly, you know, invigorated a certain way of creating for me, and yeah, just talk about some things I've been doing. So sit back and grab a cup of coffee or a tea, or you know, a beverage of some kind, and enjoy. So let me just clear some space on my desk here. It's been a while since I've been in the studio. I don't think I cleaned up at all from the last time I was here, which was several weeks ago. But we'll make do with this tiny little patch of clean-ish space. So as I've been saying, I've been at home just relaxing, and you know, I've been trying to still be creative a little bit every day. I haven't been able to do it every single day, but I am always trying to do something creative at least a couple times a week. So starting mainly like at the start of January, once I returned from, you know, seeing family and all those Christmas shenanigans, I did bring out my sketchbook and start making a conscious effort to do something every day. And I stumbled across a concept which I was familiar with a while ago, that I thought was a really great way to get back into creating on a regular basis without too much pressure, and that's something called grid journaling. I first became aware of this quite a few years ago with an artist, Kelly Wynn, who does some really great workshops. I actually did an online workshop for her a few years ago. That's how I was introduced to her, and she introduced the concept of grid journaling to me and to many artists, and I don't think she was the first one to do it, but that's definitely where I saw it. And it's basically a way of just creating art without the pressure of having anything finished. So let me just flick through my, I'll show you some more of these in a second. I'm just trying to find the page where I started the grid journaling. There it is. So grid journaling is a process where you just, you know, divide up a page in a sketchbook, or even just a loose sheet of paper, into small grids. I mean, this one I've just done 6. I think with Kelly, most of the ones that she does more of this sort of, you know, 3x3 grid. So I've done a few different versions. But you can tape them up or just sketch them out. There is another artist as well that I've been following on Instagram. I cannot remember her name off the top of my head right now, but I will post a linky thing to her page here. She did a lot of this as well, and so I started watching her YouTube channel as well. She does a lot of collage and mixed media, but essentially it's a way to sort of just create small little artworks without having to really put too much pressure on yourself, and it's a way to experiment as well, try new techniques, try new color schemes. And so I started doing these. This was on the 2nd of January, so quite early on in January. I started breaking up my sketchbook at home. I just pulled out some things that I had in my little art stash that I have at home and started working in my sketchbook. So this is an Art Creations sketchbook or by Ranger, and it's a square. I think it's is it 10 inches by 10 inches maybe. I started this sketchbook back in June of 2023, just doing some really loose acrylic sort of studies and things. The pages are a bit sticky because it is acrylic, but I hadn't really touched it in a while. So this was the July I did these ones. So anyway, I covered a lot of the pages in just a colour of acrylic paint. And so a lot of these paintings here were done with just a base of colour. And I did that just to sort of get myself started in doing something. But then I decided to do grid journaling as well, because even blocking in pages with paint in preparation for creating, I was still feeling quite burnt out and pressure to do something on those pages. So I ditched that idea and went to grid journaling. So that's where we start off. It's a bit haphazard, I know, but that's why I'm starting off kind of in the middle of this sketchbook. So these were done on the second. I did some of these as well just to fill out the page. These are just some swatches of colours. So this has got a bit of acrylic in it, some neo colour, some acrylic paint markers, some pen, just lots of bits and pieces. And then I decided on the 4th of January to do a larger layout. So I was struggling with the idea of doing those really small, I think they're like 3" by 3" squares that Kelly Wynn tends to work with. I struggle doing things that small, so instead I did these, I just divided each page up into 4. And so the basic premise of this grid journaling idea is that you choose 3 or 4 materials or 3 or 4 colors and just start layering and creating without really thinking too much about what it is you're doing. And because you're using, again, limited palettes, everything kind of becomes cohesive, because I use masking tape to tape these up. So I'd put down some color on here, I'd then put a color here, and then put a color here. And then next time I mixed a color, I'd kind of spread it in each area as well. So each page becomes a little mini collection of art that is cohesive, but it's not important because it's only in your sketchbook, which to me at the time that I was doing these, I was really struggling to find the energy to commit to creating something. I'm the kind of person that I can't remain stagnant for too long, but the longer that I sit around not doing anything creative, the harder it is for me to begin. And I know that that is a common issue that a lot of creative people have. It's like the longer you wait and put it off, the more pressure you put on yourself to make something worthy or amazing or groundbreaking. And so these little bite-sized pages and grid journal projects are really good for me personally to get back into that mood of creating, or that inspiration of creating. So each of these little sketches could become an artwork on its own. I could base this little work here, the composition that I had that I've created here randomly, I could base a whole painting on this. I could expand all of these into larger artworks if I feel like it. So I really like this one here, and this sort of off-center balance of the trees here and then the smaller trees. This area almost looks like it could be a pond or something. So none of these were planned. They're just, I have no, I'm not thinking about anything in particular when I was creating them. I was just laying down colors and seeing what happened. So I did another, this was the next day. I divided these up into sort of rectangle shapes, and then this again square. So I did all of these in one day. And honestly, I would have spent no more than maybe an hour and a half doing these. I'd lay down the colors. I'd go and, make a coffee, do whatever, come back, put down some more colors, some more layers, go and put some stuff in the washing machine, come back, and I'd come back and forth throughout the day, just looking and studying and, doing what I could feel like doing. So these studies were definitely more of what my current sort of style of painting is, but I am wanting to push myself more into abstraction, which is something that I tell myself I want to do all the time, but then I always end up making things, in my opinion, too realistic still. So even though I'd like these when I look at them now, at the time I was kind of like, I kept feeling to myself that I'm just falling back on what I always do. So I like this one here. I think these lines in front of it sort of make it a bit more abstract, but yeah, I wasn't really happy with those at the time. So then I pushed myself on the 6th, this is the next day. I picked up a few golden colours, golden fluid paints, because I want to play around with transparency. I have used these colours before. I have quinacridone violet, quinacridone burnt orange, nickel azo yellow, and anthraquane blue. I can never pronounce that right. And I tried the smaller square format as well with these and tried to create more abstract. I also introduced a bit of collage into this too. So I'm just gonna, if I can focus it a bit closer for you. Is that focused? Yes, I think so. So yeah, I did create some more, some collage as well, because I've been using my gel press, a little, my jelly, what's it called, jelly press. I've been using that quite a bit as well to create collage papers, which again is something that I've picked up from a few YouTubers that I've been watching and inspired by. And so I kind of experimented with some different textures and things. This was the 8th. And again, this would have been maybe an hour and a half worth of grid journaling. This is all just acrylic paint, I'm fairly sure. A bit of paint pen. I think there may be a little bit of collage as well. I think this is a collage piece here. Again, pushing the abstraction. Like, I really enjoy how the forms are there, and you can tell that there's like, it's based around landscapes and trees, but it is definitely more abstracted, which is where I feel as though my artistic heart is pushing me. I really enjoy these. This one is actually my favorite out of the 3. See if I can hold that up without it being out of focus. This one is my favorite out of the 3, and it was actually a mistake. I was trying to do some details and things, but everything was still a bit wet, so it just got mushed. And then I ended up just doing these marks over the top, and I actually really like this one. This is actually, yeah, definitely my favorite out of this whole grid. And the color schemes as well, I really like these colors too. So on the 9th, I decided to go bigger. Again, I started out with the idea of these being a lot more like the previous page. I wanted to expand on some of these ideas, but bigger. But for some reason, my brain went, I feel, a bit too realistic again. So we've got like quite obvious trees. I do really like the color. I like some of the marks that I was making in here as well, but it's not really where I was trying to go. So these again, this was one of the artists that I've been inspired by a little bit. It's an artist called Marjorie Thompson, who creates these really very, I guess, geometric looking forests. And it's a little bit too geometric for me. I prefer more flowy kind of compositions, but her work is very angular. But I love her use of colors and the way that she creates the light and the depth in her paintings. I'll pop a few of them up on the screen here just so you can see where my ideas have come from. And so I did a couple of little studies of those, and that's when I then decided to go back to some of these pages that I had already painted and created these. So these artworks here are still inspired by the work of Marjorie, but I've started to include, this is collage in here, and those sort of angular marks. Again, it feels a little bit too stark for my personal taste, but it's a stepping stone for me. So I liked these, and so then I kept going. And there's also more that I did. So this feels more like my own work. So when you are inspired by another artist, it's okay to sort of start by doing some studies of their work and sort of getting a feeling of how you would interpret their work. But then you need to sort of push it more towards what you resonate with and what you feel inspired by, instead of just, copying. Like, it's more of taking the idea, saying, hey, I really like how they have done this. I want to see how I can do it. And so that's what I've kind of done. I sort of started with like those sketches that I showed you before. These sort of were more, directly inspired by her artworks. And then I did some larger versions, again, to sort of get an idea of how she's constructing her paintings in a way. And then I've started pushing it in my own direction from then on. So this is, again, another combination between some collage work, some gel press collage, and some paint. And then this one here, I love. This, I love everything about this. I wish that this wasn't in my sketchbook. I wish this was on a canvas, but it's not, unfortunately. But again, I've used these trees are actually collage papers and gel pressed papers that I've then torn and cut out into shapes of trees. I've added lots of texture in the brush strokes. This was like the page was already painted with this pinkish color, and I've kind of just layered on top of it. But this to me feels like more like me using the techniques that I was inspired by with another artist. So this was on the 12th of January. And then I discovered another amazing artist, Jenny Gravatt. She's a UK artist, and she creates a lot of mixed media artworks as well, and uses trees as her motifs a lot in her work. But she's also been creating this series of trees and moonscapes and nocturnal artworks. I'll pop some pictures up of her artwork here again so you can see it, and I'll link her. She has a YouTube channel, she just has a website. I'll link everything in the description. But again, these were directly inspired by some of Jenny's work. I was really interested in how she builds up these layers, and even just night scenes in general. Like, that's just something that I've never really considered to be an option. And the way that she has created them really inspired me. So I did this work here, and I also started experimenting with another one. I mean, I don't think I'm going to push these much further than that, but it was just something that I was definitely inspired by and wanted to sort of have a play around with at home. And then we're back to these ones here. So I've kind of flipped back and forth in this sketchbook a little bit, and it's, you know, there's still quite a few pages to go. But that's what I've kind of been doing at home in my off time from work. And yeah, I thought I might actually just show you my process of this grid journaling, and I'll do a little grid journal on maybe just a piece of paper, or maybe even in a sketchbook. Maybe I'll just do it in a sketchbook, why not? But I'm gonna measure out a new page and a grid journal, and I'll record my process, and you guys can watch how I approach it and how I do it.
Now, how you set up your grid for your grid journal is totally up to you. It's a completely personal thing, whether you want to have 3 by 3 inch squares, or you just want to divide the page up into 4 like I'm doing here. You can use tape, or you can just draw squares. You don't need to have tape to make it so precise. I kind of like having the nice clean edge with the tape, but you'll see later on that I ended up taking it off before I totally finished anyway. But how I'm setting up my page, I'm just going to do a quick little grid journal of 4. So I'm just dividing this page up into 4 quadrants with masking tape. And you can see here that I forgot to kind of do that middle one, so that's what I'm doing here. Anyway, to begin with, I'm just going to scribble and make some marks on the paper. You remember these grid journals, it's really more about just experimenting and playing. You don't need to have a plan in mind. And so usually the way I start is just some random marks. I'm only using 2 colours in this grid journal. Actually, well, 3 colours maybe. I've got, this is phthalo blue. I've got I think it's quinacridone burnt sienna. I think that's this colour here I'm putting in. And then I have an unbleached titanium as well, which I use to help change the values in the colours. But I'm just starting with really messy scribbles just to cover each of these little quadrants in something. And I'm making sure I add a little bit of each mixture into each quadrant so that they all tie in together. I don't have any plan at this point. I will also mention that obviously I've sped these videos up. I've increased the speed just so that it doesn't take forever. But yeah, I'm not planning anything. I'm just thinking about mixing colours, creating textures with my brush, filling the whole square with something, and just, you know, playing around with colours. Again, because I've got a very limited palette of just 2 colours and white, I sort of play around with adding some contrasting colours. So this really bright orange up against that greeny blue colour has like a really nice contrast to it. I'm now scratching back with the pencil to create some marks. Just go crazy, have fun with it, relax, just enjoy the process of putting down paint and colours. Change up the brush that you're using as well, and just play around with different marks. Like for some of the other ones that I did in this sketchbook, I would use a spatula to sort of scrape the paint on, one of those Catalyst rubber scrapey tools, or brushes. I would just smear the paint, dab the paint. So in my studio for this little example, I was mostly using brushes, but you can use whatever tool you want to create different textures and colours. So this is the point here where I decided that I will probably turn these into abstract landscapes. So that's why you can see me painting in a lighter value as a horizon. But I'm just, really just playing around with simple compositions. Like I don't really know what I'm doing at the moment. I'm just playing around and responding to whatever I have already put down. So here I'm adding in back some more darker green colours because I felt like it was getting a bit too light. So I play around with some darker colours that I add in. This is where I start to introduce a collage aspect. This is something you don't have to do, but I've been really playing around with this a little bit more lately. This is a gel press or jelly print on tissue paper that I'm using at the moment. I'm really liking collaging with tissue papers because when you paste them down, I use just matte gel medium. They kind of become semi-transparent. So it's a really nice layering tool because you can see what's underneath still as you're layering these pops of colour. So I really liked this turquoisey colour. I felt like it matched in quite nicely with this colour scheme. So yeah, I'm just brushing on. This is just gel medium. I use matte gel medium. This is, I think, the Golden brand, but there's heaps of different brands. The tissue paper, because it's very thin, it can sometimes be a little bit of a challenge to glue it down without it disintegrating. So you can see me having a bit of a struggle here. But I did eventually get it down. And yeah, as I was saying, like it's a really nice medium to sort of collage with because any area that doesn't have paint on it from the printing process but kind of becomes transparent once you glue it down. So then the underneath layers will show through in the tissue paper and it just creates a really nice texture and a different sort of element to make it a bit more of an interesting, rather than just having layers of paint. It's just a bit more of an interesting kind of thing. And so, yeah, I'm just adding a little bit of this around in each little quadrant. Again, just to tie them all in to make them like a little mini series. These gel pressed papers, I just did them at home. I've got a gel press at home and it's just really simple mark making. You lay down the paint onto the gel press, you make some marks, you print it, you pull it off. It's very simple. You can see I'm adding in this really bright yellow paper now as well because I felt like I needed a bit of a pop of colour that I hadn't put down there. And this yellow, it's a very similar kind of tone to that burnt umber. Once you add white to it, it goes a very similar golden yellow. So yeah, I think that worked really nicely. And so I'm just laying that down. I'm starting to think a little bit about the composition now that I've got those horizons in and I'm sort of adding in these textures. I'm starting to think about what I can do to make these little paintings into something. That's another fun aspect of these, this grid journaling. It's kind of like a challenge of starting with something very abstract and very random, and then you have the challenge of pushing yourself and to make it into something. And it's you kind of like clawing your way back into creating an artwork out of chaos essentially. And it's so you don't really care as much because it's in a journal and there's no plan, no one even has to see it if you don't want them to. There's this freedom of I'm just going to create for the fun of creating, and if this works, awesome. If it doesn't work, oh well, who cares? That's the kind of mindset that I have when I'm doing these little spreads. And so it's a lot of freedom of just playing and exploring. And you find that you end up playing around with different ideas. Like, for example, I'm putting down this pale pink paper and sort of tearing these tree shapes until creating like these larger trees in the foreground, which is then pushing everything else further into the background. So instead of it being a landscape that's more sort of you're standing further away and you're looking at like this vista. These trees that are in the foreground suddenly bring you a lot closer and you have this big tree in the foreground that wasn't there before. And, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but being able to experiment on this smaller scale gives you a lot of freedom and you can sort of work out ideas that, you're not really committed to because it's just a sketchbook. It's just a grid journal. It doesn't really matter. But a lot of people, you can, I am just tearing the paper and laying it down. Like you can, if you're a bit more fussy or you want some straighter lines, you can just cut the paper. I'm too lazy to do that, so I just tear it, which also gives me quite sort of irregular shapes as well. Like it's not precise at all. And so that kind of adds to the look. Here I am adding some more of that burnt sienna on top of these trees because I felt like they were a little too pale and they weren't quite reading as being in the foreground as much as I wanted them to. So I'm just adding a little bit more colour onto that. and just playing around with those layers a bit more. And then I decided that it needed some smaller marks. So this is a really, really tiny, thin paintbrush, and I just felt like I needed to add some thinner tree shapes and squiggles and things onto some of these compositions, just to, again, just add another mark and add another element of something. And also to, I'm always kind of playing around with contrast as well. So everything was quite either mid-toned or dark. And so I wanted to add in like this almost pure, it's the unbleached titanium. And so it's quite a light colour, light value against everything else. And so that's why I was sort of putting in some of that, because it doesn't show up as much in the film, but in reality it was actually quite dull. And here I am again adding in another mark with a paint pen. This one's got like a real scruffy sort of edge to it, like the nib has been squished a lot, and so it has this fuzzy kind of marking. And again, adding in some more marks with my paint pen, which I didn't really like that paint pen much. It was a bit dry. So getting to the point here where I'm sort of having trouble seeing each of the individual paintings, and so I start to add in a bit more of a contrasting sky. So this has a lot more of a impact. It's much lighter colour, and I'm playing around with the negative space in that sky horizon area. And so that kind of helped me see a little bit clearer what was happening, and it brought out a bit more of the, what's the word? I suppose it's a bit more contrast and a bit more shape into the horizon, and defined some of those negative shapes a bit more. But I was starting to have trouble looking at each individual painting at this stage. And so in a minute, I actually take the tape off, and then I can see a little bit clearer each little individual painting, because I'm using the tape and I'm just painting right up over the tape in some places. It kind of blurs the edges and it makes it hard to tell the difference between one painting compared to the other. So it's sometimes using the tape's good, but it can also be a bit of a hindrance as well. So here I am just peeling off the tape, and as soon as I peel it off, you can immediately start to see each of those individual little studies, and that really nice crisp edge that the tape gives. It really sort of creates that negative space around each of these paintings, so it's much easier to sort of see them as individual little artworks. So once I took the tape off and I could see the values of everything a bit clearer as well, I just came in with like a little brush and started adding a few more little details here and there to try and finish off each of these little pieces. So all up, I have sped this tape up, but all up, I spent like maybe no more than 20 to 30 minutes on these 4 little sketches. And you can see that like from that really abstract beginning and that really random with, lobbing down colours with no plan, I've now got 4 little paintings that I can push forwards, and I can either recreate these larger or I can just move on to another page and do more. But this is really fun, and so this is what I've been doing. This is my technique and what I've been creating when I've been at home. So here is some rather shaky footage of these little grid journal artworks up close. I don't have like a proper camera mount, so I was kind of being a bit shaky with my hands. But this is how they ended up looking. You can sort of see a lot of the texture that's in the paint as well, and because those collage elements are stuck on, it creates this really interesting layering that happens. And again, I only used 2 paint colours and like an unbleached titanium, so it's a very limited palette. And then the addition of the collage papers does add pops of colour that I haven't mixed, but it sort of works really, really nicely. They almost look like looks like a river behind it. So I did scan these pictures. I thought I would scan them just so you could have a bit of a look at them isolated and see them on their own. I mean, they're not, you can see them up in the hand. They're not like amazing artworks, but I just wanted to show you how the individual little artworks can be isolated and looked at and studied, and they can be starting points for other artworks. So you could scale these up, you could create different versions with different colour palettes, and so yeah, that's what the final results were. So that's it from me today. I hope you enjoyed that video. I do plan on doing more videos this year. I always say that at the start of the year, but I am going to make a really conscious effort to post more regularly. Hopefully that
actually happens. Who knows? Anyway, if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe and like this video, because that really helps the channel. It also helps YouTube realize that, hey, other people might like this video too. So it helps spread this channel around to other creative people that might be interested in watching it. Once again, thanks for joining me, and I hope to see you again in the next video.